This is Truman. Have you ever been afraid of death? Have you ever feared that you might die in an accident? When I was just a little boy, me and my friend was going to visit my mother at a shopping center. It was a rainy day. My friend darted across a busy street. I was more cautious. I remained and I watched and waited till there was no cars in the way that I might pass over the road safely. But he kept mocking me. Come on, chicken. Come on, chicken. And finally, I rushed across the street. I wasn't cautious. I didn't see this one car. And as I saw the car, it was too late for me to go back. I tried to stop, but the road was so slick, my feet went up in the air. I fell flat on my back. I watched that automobile come right to my nose, and my body was under the bumper with my nose right against the front tire. And I realized, oh my goodness, in another foot my head would have been crushed. I got up and I stood on the other side of the street. My friend thought it was so funny, he laughed and laughed. But I stood there and I had this crystal clear thought. I should have died by that accident. But why didn't I die? And the thought was so clear. Truman, God has a purpose for your life. Our verse today is Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, unto good works which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. If you're saved with a purpose. And if you're willing to live for the purpose that God saved you, you cannot die by an accident. You cannot be taken out by anything until you've had the opportunity to fulfill the purpose, the mission that God has given you to do. Now, if you're not willing to live for God's mission, then you can die by an accident. Your days can be cut short and not fulfill the will of God for your life. But if you are like the Apostle Paul, you're committed to do God's will, you will finish the work that God has given you to do. Jesus used this same word in John chapter 5:36. The work the Father has given me to finish. And Jesus from the cross said, it is finished. Jesus could not die by the hands of the Pharisees. He could not die by the hands of the Romans. He could not even die by the cross. You see, until he finished his mission, he alone was the one who gave up his life. And when he finished his mission, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. He could not die until his mission for you and I was accomplished. The Apostle Paul knew that God had a mission for him. We find as Paul faced death so many times, he couldn't die. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he says, I was in stripes above measure. I was in prison more frequently. I faced death often, but he didn't die. Why? He wasn't finished with his mission. In verse 24, he says, 5 times I received 40 stripes save one. Why didn't he die from the beatings? He wasn't finished. He says 3 times, I was beaten with rods. Why didn't he die? He wasn't finished his mission. He says, I was stoned. He should have died, but he didn't. Why? Because God preserved his life. He had appointed a good work for Paul to do. And then he says 3 times, I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've been in the deep, in the sea. Why didn't he drown? Why, he had a mission to fulfill. In Jerusalem, when he preached Christ, they wanted to kill him. They threw him in prison. And in prison, the Lord came to Paul. And in Acts 23:11, he encourages Paul, Paul, as you've testified of me in Jerusalem, you must also testify of me in Rome. You see, God wanted Paul to testify before Caesar. And so he is sent in a prison ship to Rome. He is sent as a prisoner, but he's going as God's preacher. And there he prays. And God reveals to him they're going to face a terrible storm. And the ship will be lost, and the cargo will be lost, and many lives will be lost. And Paul warns. He warns the captain, but the captain doesn't listen. And so Paul, all he can do is pray. They face a 14-day storm. Night and day. There's no hope left of them being saved. But the Apostle Paul has heard God, and God has come and encouraged Paul. And he goes out to all of the people on the ship and says, be of good cheer. God has spoken to me. And God has said the ship would be lost, the cargo lost, but God has given me every one of your lives. Not one of you shall die. You see, Paul made a difference. You and I can make a difference by prayer. And then in the shipwreck, they landed on the Isle of Malta. A poisonous snake clutched onto Paul's hand. He just threw it aside. He couldn't die. Why? God said, you're going to Rome. And I want to tell you that God has a Rome in your life. That God says, just as Jesus had a purpose, just as Paul had a purpose, you have a purpose. And the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And if you're in the center of God's will, persecution, sickness, accidents cannot take your life until you have finished. A great verse for today, Ephesians 2, verse 10. God bless you, my friends.